In today's global economy, quality matters. Benjamin Franklin once quipped, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten." Quality Matters is here to talk about all things quality. So whether you're looking to improve your business, getting ready for an audit, or dealing with failed inspections, tune in, check us out, then get back to doing work that matters.
Well, hello. Welcome back to the Quality Matters podcast, brought to you by Texas Quality Assurance, where quality management gets simplified. Today, we've got another guest on the podcast. This is Chis Carson with DEKRA. Now, at Texas Quality Assurance, we've had a great relationship with DEKRA for a number of years now. What we call a certification body. We've talked about this several times on the podcast, and so I thought it'd be great to hear from them personally, and talk a little bit about what it means to be a certification body and some of the other roles that they play, and just some of the various differences and nuances. So with that, let me bring on Chris. So howdy, Chris.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Thanks for being here today.
Sure, my pleasure.
So Chris, let's get started real quick. Tell me a little bit about, yourself and your role with DEKRA. And I always just love hearing how folks get into this weird quality world anyways.
Yeah, I have kind of it's a really weird, at least it feels weird to me anyway.
I think it is with everyone.
Entree into the quality world. Probably, I would say, over 20 years ago, I just decided to change careers. There was a certification body, and if I use the term CB, that's one of the things I know that I'm sure a lot of alphabet soup comes out there. But when I say CB, it means certification body. If I slip and go really old school and say registrar,
right,
all means the same thing. Someone giving you an ISO certificate. So I just wanted to, I guess, apologize for any confusion in advance.
Yep.
I was looking, new career, and there was a ad in the paper, so it tells you how long ago that was. That was still in the paper, and it was a certification body that wasn't too far away from my house. So I went. I had a great meeting, good chemistry with the people. I had no idea what they actually did. My only response when they said, "Do you know about ISO 9000?" I said, "I know when car glass repair companies are certified to it," because there were a lot of ads on the radio at this time saying use XYZ. We're the only repair company that's ISO 9001 certified, but something must have worked. So they and so I began the career in sales at that time, and it was an interesting time too, because I'm dating myself here, that at that time, ISO 9001 2000 had just been released.
Right.
And so you had the December 2003 transition date.
Yep.
So not only was I coming in not really knowing anything about
that's a fun time to come in right in the middle of that transition period.
Exactly that. It's also a period where they were really fundamentally shifting too. So it was an interesting time, especially I went to the auditor exchange right after I'd started.
Sure.
With that. So I was a month in, and it's like, okay, let's chart the differences between the two standards. And I'm just sitting there like Homer Simpson, you repeat the part where he said all about the things. That's really the only comparison that you can have.
It's not fun, and I don't wish it on anyone, but it's honest to God truth that sometimes the best way is just to get tossed into the fire and try not to burn.
Yeah. I really felt like it was just, hey, do you know how to swim? No, push me off a dock.
Right.
Let's go for it. But I think that it was beneficial that once I started, took some additional training that the auditors did, went on audit to actually see what all these really long $5 words and clauses and everything actually meant in, quarter dollars terms. It helped do that for me, so that as I began my career, I felt, and I say this with all humility, that I could try to explain it in a simpler fashion.
Yes.
Now I still have
Yes.
family that still says, "What do you do?" And I just
Right.
can't explain it to them. It's just,
Oh, believe me, I have that as well. We, we just moved, and so we started a new church, and so they're all asking, "Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I just tell people I run my own business." Like,
yeah.
"Well, what do you do?" I'm like, "Management consulting." Oh, okay. Like, that's good enough.
Right. It's. I have one family member. She is she's actually going to grad school now for marine biology, and so her degree is in environmental sciences. So with her, I kind of take it from the ISO 14001 approach.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, and so from that standpoint, she gets
Yep.
a little bit. So at least I have one out of
Right.
hundreds of family members that
Yep.
understand. And so I'm with DEKRA certification. DEKRA certification is one of a number of business units in a part of DEKRA. Global company in testing, inspection, certification. TIC is what they call it. So our group, like I said, is in the ISO third-party accredited certification, supplier audit field. So been there almost 10 years, which kind of seems surprising.
Doesn't happen a lot these days.
Exactly. And my my role's gone from the sales side to more of the operations, but do assist on the technical side. So I get to kind of see it from all different points of view. So it makes it kind of interesting. Every day is different. I used to say it on the sales side that every day was different because of the type of companies that would come in, but now it's every day is different just because of all the different touch points that I have both within our organization, and then of course the fact that there are other entities around the world as well.
Yep. Now that could be a whole other kind of topic of conversation about how all these different pieces fit in. I know that's something that I guess I see a lot of times with some of these smaller registration bodies around here, and I'm not trying to dog on anyone in particular, but sometimes it's the husband owns the consulting group and the wife owns the certification group, and it's like, I mean, I get it, they're separate legal entities, but are you really able to stay biased here? I mean, unbiased here.
Right.
You're really able to do this? I'm like, I don't know.
And yeah, that's a hard part because at the end of the day, ideally, you want everyone to be doing what's right on the client's behalf and doing it above board. And that's not to say people are or aren't, but there's a lot of stuff.
And you have to manage that sometimes, but yeah. You don't want to build it into the structure.
Right. And that's always the thing too when you get into the stuff with accredited certification. So when we talk about accreditation, there's the International Accreditation Forum. So that's a global organization that puts out all the documents saying this is how auditors should conduct themselves, to here's how time is calculated, to determining auditor competence, all these type of things. And then they have their own what you'd call accreditation bodies that are members across the globe. And those accreditation bodies are the ones that basically bless a DEKRA or another certification body to give an accredited certificate. So it's kind of how I compare it to it's like having a degree from University of Texas, Arizona State, one of those places that it's an accredited university versus, hey, here's a diploma from Chis Carson University.
Right.
Might go with the same stuff, but not the same, rigors.
So let me ask this. There are kind of a few points here that you want to talk about, and you'd mentioned something about a pre-audit versus gap analysis, and there's no shortage of terms when it comes to the auditing world, right? We've got gap analysis, we've got internal audits. Heck, even in the certification process, you start with stage 1 and stage 2 audit, and there's just absolute no lack of options here. So tell me a little bit about what's all this mean. How are the audits that you guys do different from audits that we do?
Right. And I think that's a great thing, kind of starting the difference between, consultants and certification body in simplest is the consultants are putting in the system to meet the requirements of the standard. The certification body is verifying that the company meets those requirements. And so from that, when we talk about accreditation, there's a lot more rules per se. So when we talk about a gap analysis, gap assessment, gap audit, same concept, many different names, but
we have no lack of jargon in this industry.
Oh my gosh, I know. Well, I have a team, and we've been very regimented about documenting our processes, training, all that thing that comes up all the time is, can you give me an acronym, dictionary definition chart? It's not something for that. And like, well, do you want it just for us or for all the other groups as well? Because there's a lot more. I mean, just even the abbreviation of your own business unit gets changed every.
Oh yeah.
But the gap assessment is really truly when a consultant goes in there and benchmarks to determine where you're deficient in regards to the standard, provide feedback on that gap essentially, and then put together, work with you on how to get to where you need to be. For a pre-audit, in some ways it functions similarly concept-wise, but certification bodies can't consult. That's one of the big rules. So we can't even call it a gap assessment just from the fact that it would.
Consultants use that term all the time as well.
It would imply things even if that's not anywhere close to what's actually being done. So pre-audit typically is more of a dress rehearsal where the certification body will run through the standard similar like they would in the two stages of the initial certification. Probably not go in as much depth just because it's really more to.
It's almost like the rehearsal dinner before a wedding.
Exactly.
We're not actually doing it. We just want to make certain people are familiar with what's going to happen.
Yeah, want to make sure the groomsmen have the best man has the ring, stuff like that. But it's really looking at it as a high level to just, I think one, before you jump into the certification itself, give you some confidence that, you're probably pretty close. We can say at the same time, here's where you're lacking. Here's an area of concern, as we would call it. We can as a certification body, we can say, here's exactly where you're at. Here's where you need to be, but we can't put those steps or plans forward to say, this is what you should do. You can ask and say, would this meet the intent? And we could say, yes, that would meet the intent.
But that's about the most your auditors can do is just to answer those questions of yes or no.
Right, exactly. And some typically, as I said, it's more of a dress rehearsal type, but some do want to do a pre-audit very early with the thought of getting a blueprint and an idea of where they might need work before they look at a consultant or other options, so that they're a more educated shopper. Which it is helpful that I only need to focus on these areas versus a totally new system. But part that's problematic though too with that is that it's a limited effectiveness, that if you don't have, it depends on how much of a system you have in place. Because if you're saying I don't have any system in place, there's not a lot to audit, and so the whole standard is essentially the gap. That you gotta cross.
I would say for us on the consulting side of things, that probably 4 out of 5 times that we get brought in for a consultation, the gap assessment is almost useless, because the folks we often engage with are smaller shops. They don't have the resources that some of the other larger facilities do. And so they're calling us in, and they're going from, we've got Bubba over here that's been working with us for 30 years. I've been doing this for 40 years, and my son's here is going to get to take over the business. We're told we need to get certified. And that's what we walk into. And so we don't even start with a gap assessment there. We've had to come up with our own completely separate tool there to help out these folks. We call it a 5-point review, but that's a whole other topic. But it's the same idea. Is we go through process by process, and we just try to extract from them what are you doing that might meet the requirements, and what's left that we've got to come up with.
Right. That they're doing it. They've probably done it that way, like you said, 20, 30, 40 years, but where is it? It's in someone's head.
Yes. And how do we extract that from 20 years of experience? Yes.
Exactly. It's a tribal knowledge that you're trying to get to the place that it's you couldn't have been in business this long without having some kind of process structure and things like that. But have you committed it to some kind of medium where it can be disseminated, understood, and then look at all those other points? That's the part that's always the toughest when companies are going.
I obviously audited for DEKRA for a little while, and I didn't do just a ton of audits. It was fairly infrequent. But that was one thing that, probably every single audit when we'd have a finding is the very next question out of someone's mouth was always, well, what do I need to do about it? And, that was my absolute least favorite part of being the third-party auditor, because I just want to jump in and help folks.
Right.
And so I'd have to tell them, take a look at the standard, come at me with a suggestion.
Yes, exactly. Even I know some, the people that trained me would back in the day would say, well, some companies have done it like this, some companies have done it like that.
That's
helpful. But even that's probably, you got 2 feet off, a couple of your toes dangling off the ledge on that part.
You don't want to do that very, very often at all.
It's a very tough thing, especially when you want to help, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all in business for, that we want to see these people succeed, because it's important. It's important that these companies are successful and they're able to expand their clientele or keep the clients by getting the certification, for sure.
Now, one thing I've recommended to folks before when they're going through this process and they're really looking to improve is, again, coming from us helping out with the internal audits, the consultation, and what you guys do, is I'll tell our clients, look at the audit as kind of a negotiation, but you're negotiating over, is this compliant? Is it not compliant? So if the auditor's saying something to you, he's not a bad guy. He's not trying to get you. He's just saying that there's not enough evidence here for me to confidently check off compliance. But also what I'll tell them is, once you get past that first year and you've got the system in place, we know that we're good and we're working. So your external auditor is a fantastic resource to learn from. Once you're going through it, I used to love when I would get audited, I'd ask our auditor, as soon as he's finished and he loves the way that we did it, or maybe had a couple of things to clarify, is I would outright ask the question, what have you seen other people do here? Just because I know that auditor has seen 100 other shops do this 200 different ways.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's one of those things where we can put it in like opportunities for improvement. It's one of those things where says, okay, you're compliant. This is not a finding. This is not anything to the standard. You've met the intent, and that's important. But here's some things that you might want to consider that helps the continual improvement, making it more robust. All that, because as you said, the first audit is the line in the sand. It's the benchmark. It's expecting that there's going to be things done, because it's your first time. The first time you ride a bike. You get better every time, and it's that same way with your system.
It's so I don't know the right word for it. The only word I comes to mind is it's kind of silly for companies to think that first year they're going to make it through with a zero finding audit. I'm like, hey, let's just knock that chip off your shoulder real quick, and let's be grateful that he found something. Now find a way that you can make the best of it.
Right, exactly. Now, there's always the part of, how valuable was the finding, how useful was a finding, that kind of stuff. That, there's things where, you pull up a bunch of records and only one wasn't controlled properly. Well, that's not really, there's human error that has to factor into that too. That we get audited too. That's the thing that we talk about, the accreditation. We get audited at least once a year at the office, but then they also pick clients per standard to witness our auditors when they're doing. So that's part of how they have that guarantee that we're doing it the right way, that we're doing it above board, that there's a consistency and integrity in the process. But even there's times where, and it's, I remember one time I got finding that, well, this had the wrong number in there. And I said, okay, you're searching. It's like that's the human error. Now, the thing is that I think that was just, old group that we've been very fortunate that the group that we work with now for accreditation, is a solid group that, when we, and we're human, we mess up. And when we mess up, it's truly, I feel like, a good finding that it has improved us. And then there's a lot of things that we get that are in that OFI. Some of it's just because the standards all went through a revision a number of years ago, and the guidance documents are going through those revisions. So you look at it, and by the time you get to page 20, you're thinking, thinking of a lot of other things, but also thinking this isn't any different, and materially, big picture wise, 5,000 foot level, it's not. But then there's something that it's, oh yes, you must also consider this.
Well,
it's like,
here's something that we've run into is we actually ran into an audit you guys recently did for one of our clients, and it was the legitimate findings, but then it's kind of in that category. It's like, well, how valuable is this or isn't this for this organization right now? So we take a look at the context clause. Okay. Context makes tons of sense when you've got 3 or 4 locations, or you're partially owned by one group and you do some services over here and some are different over there. But then when you've got a company that's only 10 employees, well, context is kind of like, it's just what we do. And so it oftentimes gets overlooked. But then there's others where, oh my gosh, say you find an issue with suppliers. I have hardly ever seen a third-party finding in relation to suppliers that's not valuable, because folks are just like, well, I've just used them forever, so that's what I do. Well, they're the only ones there, or they've got 1,000 excuses, which in their mind, justified immediately, but it can be really super helpful. So they kind of fall into different categories.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and that's one of the parts with the new structure that they've all kind of adopted. That if you look at them, they're all very homogenous from a structure standpoint. That they say a lot of the same things. Obviously, there's certain sections within there where there's the variances depending on whether it's quality, health, safety, environment, whatever. But yeah, the context of the organization is one that it
probably gets a lot of folks.
It's interesting, the different ways that it could go, because even the guide documents seem really, it goes internal and external stakeholders. Well, when you go internal and external stakeholders, that can cover a wide swath of people and
well, how far externally are we going? And this is where the door gets opened up for the kind of parallel look between ESG and 9001 and 14 and 45, because then you've got those external stakeholders and interested parties, and you can really begin to expand and kind of creep that out. And we've had a couple of clients that have come to us and say, they're like, well, our customers wanting to know where we're at on all this ESG stuff. I'm like, well, you've got 9000 and 14,001, right? Yeah. And you've got a safety program, right? Yeah. Cool. Let's start talking about that.
Yeah.
That whole interested parties clause that confuses you, that's your best friend right now.
Yeah, exactly. You got a lot of people. You got a lot of people that you can fill in that bucket.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of good we can do with that. So it can be a little oddball, but it opens up the door to do a lot that, otherwise folks have to start from the ground floor up.
Oh yeah. So
tell me, what about when a consultant is participating in an audit? This is a weird area.
So there's, I guess, 2 things. There's attendance and there's participation. So attendance, there's a couple standards that are pretty much no, they don't want it.
That's how it is on the API side. On the API side, we are not even allowed to speak to the auditor. Don't even shake their hand.
Right. Exactly. And then, then you have participation, and the whole goal with the participation is to prevent the auditor from answering the questions for the client, because we know the system as a consultant. You put it in, and we're trying to see if the client does. So it's that part. But I will say that personally, I do think initially anyway that it's if it's allowed by the standard, it's not bad to have the consultant there from the standpoint of, we've talked about it, alphabet soup, all these acronyms that the auditor could be asking for something and client has no frame of reference to what that even means. That it's one of those things. That's why, when we're doing an audit too, that we don't sit there and try and spring all these non-conformances at the end and say, hey, here you go. Congratulations, you got 9. We want to bring it up when we see it. That's why we have closing meetings every day. That's why we bring it up on the floor, because there is that vernacular that people use that's different. There's concepts and all that you audit all these different companies. They can all talk about it the same way. You might be more familiar with calling it one thing, I'm familiar with calling it another. So I think that's where it's things that they can clarify what the question is. I think that's a great thing. But obviously from that standpoint where if they're answering the questions for them, it hurts it.
You don't want to be auditing a front. You want to be able to audit the organization.
Right. That's a great way to put it, for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. And I will say, I wish it was a little easier on the API side, because again, we get our smaller clients, and if you've got a company with 5-10 people in it, they have no idea what we're talking about as auditors. And not all auditors are created equal. Some are good at breaking it down into more common English, and others aren't. And I get it, people are people, and so, but yeah, it's definitely a different world. What are have y'all ever run into situations where, kind of midway through the audit, you just have to say, time out, this isn't working? I know I've had it happen to me the first time I went through a certification audit, and we had a little come to Jesus meeting about halfway through that first day.
Right. And so a lot of times what we've done in those situations is depending on how we've looked at it, try and make that more of the pre-audit, if we could, for that, restart the whole cycle with the stage 1, stage 2. Help the company get ready, because at the end of the day, we don't want to sit there and go through an audit and ding them if they weren't ready or anything like that. But and that's where I always, putting the sales side, the sales hat on for me, that I would always, when I was talking to a company, one of the things that when we would have them fill out a request for quote, RFQ, application, questionnaire, whatever.
Again, no shortage of options there either.
Exactly. That one of the things they ask is do you have are you using a consultant? Now, the reason why we actually ask that as a certification body is to make sure there's impartiality, that we're not, there's no formal relationship or anything like that, we do have, obviously, as you mentioned, we've got auditors who do auditing and consulting, so we don't want them auditing their work.
You got to make sure that we keep those lines very, very separated.
Right. But one of the reasons that I always like to have that was when I was having the conversation with the client to get their background, where they're coming from, that if they are working with a consultant, there's, like anything, there's going to be issues. But if you're working with consultants, there's not going to be these chasms. There's not going to be things where you completely don't have something in place.
Right. We just completely didn't think about calibrations.
Right. Exactly. Or you didn't think about management review and internal audit. Didn't like that. And for those, then kind of suggest it's obviously they're right, but that you might want at least some option of a outside party to do a gap assessment, or you might want to just do this pre-audit first, because we can always call it a pre-audit, but it's easier to call it a pre-audit when it's a pre-audit and not
this was maybe long time ago now, maybe 2011, 2010. This was a company I worked for before. We'd had a consultant that had worked with us, but I wasn't happy with him most of the time we were going through it. But management was kind of like, look, we paid for it, we're doing it, run with it, it's what it is. His internal audit was just horrible. In any case, it's like, all right, fine, you don't want my opinion, I keep quiet. We went into that first stage on the audit, and we had that little come to Jesus meeting. He's like, look, your internal audit, your manager review, I can't accept this. And he's like, there's really not a whole lot else to do here on a stage one if I don't have a good internal audit management review to look at.
Right.
And so he suggested the same thing, that they were going to just consider that a pre-audit. And my manager was like, nope, we're on the timeline. We have promised a customer we're going to get this done. He was like, how soon can you come back and do all this? And so we had 1 month for me to train a whole slew of internal auditors so that no one was auditing their own work, because we weren't going to take the slightest hints, that there was an issue. But oh my gosh, that was a month of working 80, 90 hours a week.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
But they offered the same thing, and personally wish management would have said, yes, this could be a pre-audit, but he said, no, you're going to finish with a stage one, and you're going to give us a big nasty report, and we're going to work on it.
Right, exactly. And then you've got a stage two where you're following up on all the findings of the stage one.
Yeah.
I'm sure the auditor was probably asking for extra time then. It's like, this is the minimum, that's required.
Yeah.
By the standard.
Yeah, he kept saying, no, these aren't findings, but if you don't have it resolved by the time I come back, they will be after I leave. I'm like, we got you.
Yeah, and that's why, too, in our we put it in the contract, but we also talked to the client too that to just make sure we've covered ourselves, that theoretically it's possible to have it back to back, stage one and stage two, but
yes,
if there's issues,
you're in trouble.
We cannot go forward. If there's issues, there's no way. Yeah, I mean, if it's one thing, maybe you could do effective root cause
analysis. You're missing the internal audit and the management review. There's no going forward.
Yeah. No, that's not possible. Yeah, exactly. If it's a small, minor detail, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that there's that risk, and they should be aware of that.
Yep. Well, I have just kind of throw this out here. Like, I've always enjoyed working with DEKRA, and obviously we work with different certification bodies out there, but I really enjoyed working with you guys in particular. Like, I always know that I'm going to get an honest goodness answer from you. I don't worry about any of these oddball conflicts. Again, where the husband owns the consulting group and the wife owns the certification body. I don't have to worry about any of these things. And, I've had some folks be like, well, Kyle, why would you worry about it anyways? What do you care? You're doing your job regardless. I'm like, well, yes and no. I know that at some point in time, all these companies getting certified, they're going to have a customer want to dig through and prove that this is valid. And it's one of the reasons I really enjoy working with you guys is I don't have to question it. So, and y'all have even referred us to other certification bodies when it's something you couldn't do or weren't best suited to do. So maybe we can kind of finish on this thought and topic. Like, what is it that really sets you guys apart? What makes you all different from some of these other certification bodies out there?
That's a good question, and thank you, for the kind word. That's definitely what we try to do and to be, and that we don't want to promise things that we can't deliver on. Oh my gosh,
you're fine. These noisemakers are always on.
I would have turned the ringer off, but then I'd never remember to turn it back on again.
Yes, I've done
all
that.
The rest of the calls after the podcast. When I first started with DEKRA, the thing that when I was interviewing with them, they said, we treat value as, our value proposition is asking the client what they value, what's important to them. It sounds silly until you've kind of gotten to know the lay of the land, where a lot of this is, oh, look how big we are. Look how many auditors we have. Look at this accomplishment. Okay, we have this big client. Well, you might have that big client because your division that does inspection has as someone on the board, and they there's a number of reasons.
It doesn't mean anything intrinsically valuable.
Right. That it's, what are you trying to get out of the certification, and how can we help you? That, yes, if we're being honest, a lot of them are, I needed to keep this business and I needed to get more business. Fine. We understand that.
Cool.
But at the same time, let's help you make this a tool to make your company better. If you're, if you want to grow, most companies do. That we can give you a platform that you can expand, use, repeat, all that. Not only for training the people, which is huge, because that's a lot of the stuff in the standard. I think that sometimes doesn't get looked at as much as just the training portion and that type of stuff. Like really defining, okay, what's really required here. But as you do that, as you grow, as you start saying, okay, maybe it's a pain in the to start having all these job descriptions, but it really forces you to look at what are you trying to set your organization up for? What do you really want these people to do, so that there's not that ambiguity, and that you can set the right metrics and processes and programs for them.
And you don't want to get it to where, you can't, but you don't want to get to aim for the target of, well, we can just get anyone in here and teach them how to do the job. No, but you want to know what's the base level competence. Give me a profile. When this guy retires or leaves or is hit by a bus, what's the profile of his replacement?
Right.
What trainings do they need in that first month, if they don't have already, to be effective as soon as possible?
Exactly. And I think the other part is, to some degree, I think we have a lot of vampires on our thing that no matter what time this calls, text, things like that, feels like we're talking, but it's a culture thing that, we've been fortunate that the people that are in the management team, want to realize that, yes, there's a regulation side of it, of course, but at the end of the day, we're a service-based industry, and a service-based industry has a lot of high expectations. I always kind of go back to the thing that says, as soon as you could get a hamburger for under $1 and have clean bathrooms, at a McDonald's, it changed the concepts of and expectations for service industry. And so we try to do that, where we try a lot of different things. We're always willing to try and see, okay, what's the best way to try and connect with the scheduling, meet these requirements, that type of stuff. So it's fun that, and
y'all been very responsive on that as well, is and I know we've kind of pushed you a couple times on setting a date for things, but like I say, we've been thrilled about it. And you just want to clarify for everyone, we have no financial ties with DEKRA. I'm just excited to be able to work with these folks. And I thought it'd be great to have you here on the podcast and let the big bad auditor maybe have a little bit of a nicer face.
That's always nice. It's. I wish we could call people something other than auditor, because that already starts you 2 steps back, right? Before you even walk through the door.
I wish I could find another word for it, because I honestly dislike the word consultant. It's effectively a dirty word.
Yeah.
Because
just throw some words together.
Yeah. We'll come up with new acronym. Yeah.
I know.
But you kind of mentioned it. You say that you got folks that have a vampire, and I see that. Honestly, and it's a little bit different topic, but there's a lot of times that role of the consultant. Their job's to do as little on a monthly basis as possible, keep that monthly retainer going as long as possible, and never fully turn over enough control that the company can survive without them. I'm like,
that's another podcast. It's like we were talking before this about sharing stories, and I realized that I could really go down a couple of rabbit holes there.
Well, let's plan to talk about that again in the future.
That'd be fun. To share that too, because I think it's good for, I think maybe we do it and we're brainstorming on air, but I think a little bit of what we would say, we would tell companies to ask about the other one's services. That kind of stuff. I think that'd be a fun one.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. So we will finish it there. I want to thank you again for coming on. This is awesome. This is something that we've kind of talked about doing for a long time.
Yes, way too long, but nice to finally have it come to fruition.
Yep. So thank you very much. And you take care and have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in to the Quality Matters podcast here. Hope that you found something that you can take away and help put towards your business to improving your efficiency, productivity, and just building a better culture around quality. So if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. The Quality Matters podcast is live streamed out from LinkedIn, YouTube, Rumble, you name it, we're there, as well as all of the traditional podcast sources from Apple, iTunes, and Audible. So with that, you guys take care and have a great day.